we already know that there are difficult that during the time after the typhoon, there are some areas that has difficulty in getting an internet connection at this time. So we will keep the link open until 7 p.m. tonight. So you can still do your evaluation until 7 p.m. tonight. And we encourage you to answer that form because you will receive your certificate of attendance within the next 3 to 5 days. Okay, so just please be patient. It's not going to automatically send your certificate to you right after you close your evaluation link. Please wait until we send it to you within 3 to 5 days. Lastly, we encourage you to share this webinar to your networks with the hashtags #CAP Cares and #I Love Catholic Education. So let me not keep you waiting to share with us Francis's dream, Fratelli Tutti and its implications in our Catholic schools. Let us welcome with a hearty applause our speaker for today, the Provincial Secretary of the Order of Friar Minors of the Province of San Pedro Bautista. Yes, it's a Franciscan congregation. A hearty applause for Father Dexter Toledo.
First, I would like to thank the Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines for inviting me to share my reflection on the newest encyclical of our Holy Father, Pope Francis, entitled Fratelli Tutti. I guess the main reason why SEAP invited me to share my reflection on this encyclical was that I am a Franciscan. As you may very well know, the main inspiration for this third encyclical of our Holy Father is that poor, humble friar from Assisi who once dreamt of God's voice asking him to follow the Holy Spirit in following this very radical form of life. It is already quite evident at the beginning of the papacy of our Holy Father that he is up for something that is radical for his pontificate. And we saw that by his selection of the name Francis. Yes, he's not Francis the First because there is no second one. Because for a certain, no one dared to take that name. Even if in our history we have had four Franciscan popes who also had the chance to sit in the seat of St. Peter. You may wonder why no one of those Franciscan popes actually dared to take the name of Francis. For sure, that will bring honor to our beloved founder.
But
But
no,
no,
they may all have thought that there can really be only one St. Francis of Assisi. You know, we sometimes joke among ourselves that there will only be two groups of Franciscans in this world. On the first group will be St. Francis of Assisi, the perfection of all virtues. And on the second group, all of us claiming to be followers of this great man, and perhaps poor imitators of him. I agree there can only be one Francis of Assisi. What St. Francis ushered into the church is a revolution. And I guess this is what our Holy Father would want to see during his pontificate, a radically new way of defining what the church is all about. Although the encyclical does not offer many direct references to St. Francis's person or writings, beyond the opening or closing paragraphs, the inspiration of the saint from Assisi and the tradition that bears his name is present throughout the text. Several key themes carry a distinctive Franciscan valence that is worth identifying and unpacking. If there is one thing, that St. Francis and Pope Francis share in common, that is, they are both dreamers. They are both visionaries. That is why I entitled my presentation to you as Francis's Dream. I believe that this is exactly what we all need, especially during this time. The capacity to dream big dreams and to make sure that they'll be realized in our institutions. Pope Francis has this to say in Fratelli Tutti: how important it is to dream together. By ourselves, we risk seeing mirages, things that are not there. Dreams, on the other hand, are built together. This is what I believe Pope Francis is trying to bring to our attention in his new encyclical: the power of dreaming together with the sure hope that we can still improve our current situation. I would like all of us to approach this encyclical not just as a long treatise of dogmas and boring teachings from the Church's magisterium, but as an articulation of how we can bring heaven into this valley of tears through our concerted efforts and labors. But first, let us all try to get a definition of what a dream is. And here, let us consult Merriam-Webster, our dictionary, as this definition with regards to dream. The first one is that a dream is a series of thoughts, images, or emotions occurring during sleep. Interestingly, many of the visions that happen in the Bible occur during sleeping moments. Let us take, for example, Saint Joseph, the husband of the Blessed Virgin Mary. All the angels' guidance and direction were provided during his moments of rest. I was reminded that during the visit of our Holy Father here in the Philippines, Pope Francis shared how he used to have an image of that sleeping Saint Joseph in his stable, and how he would sometimes lift in some of his prayer requests with a gentle wish to Saint Joseph. Saint Joseph, I'm already tired. Please worry about these concerns for me. I need to sleep. And then, by some miraculous intervention, he would wake up with a gentle assurance of what is needed to be done. I guess that is important. Dreams can only happen if we acknowledge our own limitations and simply allow God to work His wonders after we have done the best thing that we can do. In order to dream, first, rest. The second definition is that a dream is an experience of waking life having the characteristics of a dream, such as A, a visionary creation of the imagination; B, a state of mind marked by abstraction or release from reality; C, an object seen in a dream-like state. Here, we learn that dreams do not only occur during sleep, but also when we are awake. I guess some of our students are already an expert on this. But here we know that a dream is a product of the vision of the future by great visionaries. Pope Francis himself cited some of them as inspiration for his encyclical, like Blessed Charles de Foucault, Desmond Tutu, and Mahatma Gandhi. He also mentioned Martin Luther King Jr., who was famous for his speech entitled, I Have a Dream. If you come to think of it, we are all here standing where we are now because of the people who dreamt of a much more beautiful future for all of us. And certainly, Pope Francis would want us, through this encyclical, to do exactly that. As what we used to say to our young people, libre ang mangarap bok. And so, we should continue to dream. The third definition that I see there is that a dream is something notable for its beauty, excellence, or enjoyable quality. Here we learn that a dream is directed towards a vision for something that is beautiful and excellent. In our theology, we learn that as God's creatures, we are all naturally directed towards beauty, because beauty for us must be good. Let's try this. How do you translate good in Tagalog? Mabuti? Well, maybe that's correct. But try this. Translate good morning into Tagalog. Is that mabuting umaga? No. We translate it to magandang umaga because that is for us what is beautiful. Kaya yung iba dyan na wala nakikitang maganda sa buhay nila, pumapangit. But in Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis emphasizes that no one can experience the true beauty of life without relating to others, without having real faces to love. Here we can see that your encounter with someone becomes truly deep if you begin to have common dreams already for each other. Number four, dream is a strongly desired goal or purpose. You may be familiar with a best-selling book written by Rick Warren, and the title is A Purpose-Driven Life. Dream is something like that. Pope Francis, in this encyclical, challenges us to rediscover our vocation as citizens of our respective nations and of the entire world, to direct society to the pursuit of the common good, and with this purpose in mind, to persevere in consolidating its political and social order, its fabric of relations, its human goals. He further emphasized that the existence of each and every individual is deeply tied to that of others. Life is not simply time that passes, life is a time for interactions. Here, it is quite clear that our dream is made concrete when we have people to dream with us. And so, right here at the very onset, Pope Francis challenges us to embark on a journey which his predecessors have started. That is what he intends to do with this encyclical. But before we continue, it would be good to explain what is an encyclical. Although the term encyclical originally meant a circular letter, something that we receive from the higher ups in our offices, in the Catholic Church, it took on a much more specific meaning. In 1740, Pope Benedict XIV wrote a letter entitled Ubi Primum, which is generally regarded as the first encyclical in a modern sense. The term is now used almost exclusively for a kind of letter sent out by the Pope. We know that the Pope has different forms of communications released in his many engagements like homilies, letters, messages, etc. We can say that an encyclical is at the very top of that hierarchy. We also said that this is already the third encyclical released under his pontificate. The first one is Lumen Fidei, which he signed on June 29, 2013, which is practically just 108 days after his election. This is the reason why many critics would say that this encyclical is practically the work of Pope Benedict XVI, which he was not able to release before he resigned. Thus, we can say that we can get a better appreciation of how Pope Francis thinks in his second encyclical. And the title of that encyclical is Laudato Si. He signed this encyclical on May 24, 2015. I hope that by now many of you are already familiar about its contents, even if they are just some bite-sized ideas. We actually released a booklet with a list of 10 key ideas from Laudato Si in order to make it easier to explain to simple folks. Also, this year, 2020, is declared by the Vatican as a Jubilee for the Earth to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the release of this encyclical. And now, Pope Francis comes with his third encyclical, which is very similar to his second one, that is Laudato Si. He entitled it Fratelli Tutti, which he signed in Assisi on October 3, 2020, on the eve of the feast of Saint Francis of Assisi, which many of us Franciscans would call as the Feast of the Transitus, which literally means the transit of Saint Francis into eternal life. Yes, the picture that you are now seeing is the most blessed catacomb of our beloved founder, which is very humble and simple. Like its predecessor, Fratelli Tutti does not come with a Latin title, but with a language spoken by many, Italian. That in itself is already a statement that what the Pope would like to bring in this encyclical is not just a series of old concepts and ideas, but a new one, and hopefully understandable by many. With Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis again reflects a wider conversation. In addition to many references to scripture, the encyclical cites about 292 sources that is scattered in its 288 footnotes. The majority of the citations comes from his own writings like Laudato Si, Evangelii Gaudium, and World Day of Peace messages. Most importantly, Francis cites in this encyclical his joint statement with Sheikh Ahmed Al-Tayeb on human fraternity, which he cited a total of 9 times, including a substantial quote at the end. I will be saying more about that later. As I have mentioned, he explained that this encyclical is greatly inspired by Saint Francis of Assisi, which for him expressed the essence of a fraternal openness that allows us to acknowledge, appreciate, and love each person, regardless of physical proximity, regardless of where he or she was born or lives. You may very well know that St. Francis never considered himself to be a scholar, like some of our great doctors in the church. But it is actually his simplicity that attracted many to consider his example, whether they be Catholics or not. In his encyclical, Pope Francis mentioned that Francis did not wage a war of words aimed at imposing doctrines. He simply spread the love of God. There's even one popular quote that is attributed to Saint Francis of Assisi that states, "Preach as of always. If necessary, use words." Imagine that. Well, the biggest influence of Saint Francis in his encyclical is really the title itself. We know that when the title of this encyclical was released, many commentators already criticized it for it being not so inclusive. Why Fratelli Tutti and not Fratelli e Sorelle Tutti? That is, why not brothers and sisters to all? Well, just like Laudato Si, the title is actually a direct quote from Francis's admonitions, which states, "Let all of us, brothers, consider the Good Shepherd who bore the suffering of the cross to save his sheep." In the rule, St. Francis wrote for those who desire to follow him in this way of life something that is similar to what was mentioned earlier. All of you are brothers. Do not call anyone on earth your father. You have but one Father in heaven. Understandably, the common sense interpretation of the term views the concept as exclusively masculine, referring to the bond among brothers or brotherhood. Dito nga sa Pilipinas, di ba, kapag nababanggit yung salitang fraternity, ang mabilis na sumasagi sa ating isip, frat. And frat is often associated with hazing and gang wars in our schools. But Francis didn't mean that. For him, he like Saint Francis of Assisi, would regard brother as something that is very important. You know, in the writings of Saint Francis of Assisi, he would use the word brother about 306 times. That is second to the word Lord, which he used 410 times. The term brother is essentially a relative term. It signifies relationships. This relationship is largely interpersonal and is even more than maternal love, according to him. Take note of that. When St. Francis spoke to the brothers of how to take care of another, they should be like mothers to each other. But fraternity is way more than that. In fact, in his testament, St. Francis said that the Lord gave me brothers, which means that a brother is a gift. Dating back to St. Francis himself, whenever the Franciscan friars refer to their local communities of men religious, the term used has been fraternity. It is also a term that is used by the secular Franciscan order or the Third Order in reference to the local communities or associations of women and men who have professed to live according to the Franciscan rule of life. In this way, we can see that fraternity takes on a rather practical meaning, serving as the term for a particular group of Franciscans. But I guess serving as the term for a particular group of Franciscans. But I guess for us Filipinos, you will not have that same problem. Because for us, we will just translate it simply as kapatid. At para sa atin makahulugan yung salitang kapatid. Because the word kapatid is simply about connection, connectivity. Magkakapatid tayo dahil iisa lang ang ating pinagpatiran. Galing tayong lahat sa iisang sinapupunan. And that is what we all are. We all come from God, and that is where we should all go back in the end. Thus, our being magkakapatid is more expansive and has to do with the kind of relationship one has with another. Becoming a bro or sis is very important to Pope Francis as he saw our inherent bond as being related to all women, men, and even non-human creatures as part of God's one family of creation. You may very well know that the title of Pope Francis's second encyclical Laudato Si is also inspired by Saint Francis. And that is taken from the Canticle of Creatures, which expands relationship into a more cosmic one. Thus, he looks around and sees brother sun, sister moon, brother wind, sister air, etc. In fact, at the end, he calls death as a sister. Sister death, as he would used to say, lest we forget, we will all die. And that fact should help us see the greater need for us to harmoniously coexist. To talk about fraternity as a disposition or value is to talk about how you view and relate to other people, including strangers and those who may be very different from you. It is about recognizing intrinsic familial ties with all people and creatures. Pope Francis picks up on this Franciscan logic of fraternitas in the third chapter of Fratelli Tutti. He critiques societal relationships determined by affinity, preferences, status, or any other feature and argues for a more fundamental concept of human relationship. Fraternity, according to him, is born not only of a climate of respect for individual liberties or even of a certain administratively guaranteed equality, because fraternity necessarily calls for something greater, which in turn enhances freedom and quality. So, in summary, In this encyclical, Pope Francis would like us to continue to dream for a society with warm human relationship. For the second half of my talk, allow me to elaborate on what would be Pope Francis's dream as presented in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti. The first one would be a dream of peace through dialogue. Early in the document, the Pope recalls St. Francis's famous encounter with Sultan Malik al-Kamil at Damietta, Egypt in 1219, drawing a connection to that historic episode of mutual respect, peacemaking, and fraternity, where he sees a shared sense of fraternal bond between these two men from different cultures and religions. Pope Francis identified a comparable sense of encounter he had with Grand Imam Ahmad Al Tayyib when he met in Abu Dhabi in 2019. You know, last year I was in Abu Dhabi to celebrate the traditional Simbang Gabi with our OFWs, and they were all ecstatic with the success of this meeting, which coincided with a year of tolerance declared in UAE. At that meeting, the two religious leaders signed a document that will be the seed of this new encyclical. The title is Human Fraternity for World Peace and Living Together. That document has this to say: God has created all human beings equal in rights, duties, and dignity, and has called them to live together as brothers and sisters. This is equally important to us today as we draw near to the closing of the year of ecumenism, interreligious dialogue, and indigenous people. You know, one producer of our Bible diaries would use this image of St. Francis as embrace with the Sultan as a symbol for authentic dialogue. Allow me to say something about this meeting. You know, this historic meeting happened during the time of the Crusades when Catholic empires entered into a series of wars against the Muslims in order to maintain our ownership of the Holy Land, which is the heart of the world's three major religions. In 1217, the first general chapter of the Friars Minor was celebrated at St. Mary of the Angels, that is near Assisi. In an act of inspiration, St. Francis of Assisi decided to send his friars to all nations. He crossed the border of the Fifth Crusades battle to engage in a peaceful encounter and exchange of ideas with the Sultan, despite the vilification of the Muslims by the majority of Christian Europe at the time, and that includes Pope Innocent III. It is understandable that many would want to go to the Holy Land, but St. Francis's visit there proved to be a marked contrast to the actions of the Crusaders. Though the intent of the protection of the holy sites was a goal of both groups, let me share to you a video of what may have transpired in that visit, which is based on a play which we produced when we are still seminarians. The video quality may be a bit poor, but the content of their dialogue is something very interesting. Let's watch this video.
Well, little man, I see you have courage. You've journeyed through the roads of my country, roads from which no Christian foot can step without expecting death. And now, as you stand in my tent, I see your steady eyes, and I say to myself, I would like this men in my court. They would tell me the truth, not what I usually hear. Well, holy man, what do you want of me? We wish to preach God's words and to die as martyrs to our faith. Ah, that's easily arranged. No problem at all. Stand back, you dog. I give the orders here. feed my blood-hungry countrymen. Now, holy man, what do you want of me? Only to bring you two straight wines. But I want more, little Italian. I am conquering the world for Allah. That is why I was born. That is why I am Allah's instrument. But great Sultan, I am not talking about peace. That is the opposite of war. I speak of peace in your heart. A deep satisfaction and joy that flows from within like a rich red wine. And what can give more inner peace to a warrior than victory in the battlefield? Prayer, O child of Allah. Prayer. Prayer? And do I not pray every day? Several times a day to Allah? For I am sure, great leader, that many Christians pray. But we want to teach you a new prayer that we have learned by waging the great battle within ourselves, by conquering one by one the demons in our own hearts. Your prayer is good, I am sure. I want to teach you a new prayer. Pray for me now. Here in front of you, dullard, you fetch my chest. Old man, dear brother, come here. Come here. I wish in my heart that there will be more gentlemen like you who will balance the forces of hatred and violence. Unfortunately, the world understands only two things, power and violence. Someday, your prayer says to me, the world will be turned upside down by little men who fast and pray and who die rather than take up the soul. But until the day comes, inshallah, it seems to me, can only be performed through violent men like me. Then Lord Sultan, will you pray for that day? Little brother, little man, I will do more. I will let you let out of this camp alive so that you can pray for that day. I pray when after I'm gone from this earth, but not before, Allah will change his mind and use me instruments like you, and that this great army of peace-loving beggars will balance and outnumber the forces of hatred and violence. Don't be a drink. Don't. Take these fools out from our camp and give them safe passage to their people. I will not lower myself by harming vermin and beggars and threadbare Christians. You can see from their appearance how badly we are feeling down the picture. Go! You.
You know what? The video is very romantic. More factual research would tell us that Malik Al-Kamil, whom St. Francis met, may not be that tough as we imagine him to be. He is in fact recognized as a peace-loving individual. He may be familiar with the Christians, in fact, since Egypt became a Muslim-majority area only approximately in the 10th century. Up until then, the majority had been Christians. The most widespread Christian domination in Egypt in the times of Malik al-Kamil was the Coptic Orthodox Church, and this is true for today as well. That means Malik al-Kamil, as the ruler of Egypt, knew Christians and their habits quite well. And Malik al-Kamil exemplified the Islamic laws of war. For example, after Al-Kamil defeated the Franks during the Crusades, Oliverus Scholasticus praised and commented on how Al-Kamil supplied the defeated Frankish army with food. This is what he has to say. Who could doubt that such goodness, friendship, and charity come from God? Men whose parents, sons, and daughters, brothers, and sisters had died in agony at our hands, whose lands we took, whom we drove naked from their homes, revived us with their own food when we are dying of hunger, and showered us with kindness, even when we were in their power. Well, here you see that their meeting was a fruitful one because, just like St. Francis of Assisi, Malik Al-Kamil is also disposed to make peace. That's why during that visit of Pope Francis to Ahmad al-Tayyib, they both declared that religions must never incite war, hateful attitudes, hostility, and extremism, nor must they incite violence or the shedding of blood. These tragic realities are the consequence of a deviation from religious teachings. They result from a political manipulation of religions and from interpretations made by religious groups who, in the course of history, have taken advantage of the power of religious sentiment in the hearts of men and women. God the Almighty has no name to be defended by anyone and does not want his name to be used to terrorize people. Pope Francis recognized that this kind of fundamentalism is evident not only in other religions, but in our own religion as well. A quick survey of the social media would help us see that there are many fundamentalist Catholics that would have some pages that is criticizing the Pope and his stance on issues. Now, reflecting on this dialogue with the Muslim, I am very much delighted to hear and see of how many of our schools, especially in Mindanao, is an example of how fruitful a dialogue can be, knowing that many Muslim children and youth were being provided with quality education by our Catholic institutions with respect for their religion and practices. Just very recently also, we are saddened by the death of one of our Franciscan friars, who is an American. His name is Brother Augustine Frazak, OFM. He fell in love with the Philippines, and so he wrote in his request for transfer that he would like to be buried here. Even during his 60-day abduction by some fundamentalists, that never hindered his desire to serve the people of Mindanao. Many of them were Muslims. Just like him, I'm still awed by the example of our many missionaries who quietly labored for peace through peaceful coexistence. Here, I begin to wonder on how we teach the importance of learning the values and cultures of people with whom we share different faith. The nod to the importance of interreligious dialogue and friendship across differences in the global effort to promote human solidarity is no small gesture. Francis, taking seriously the prioritization of fraternal relationship with all people modeled by St. Francis, describes this social teaching as directed not only to his Christian sisters and brothers, but also addressed to all women and men of goodwill. This expansive audience reflects the inclusive vision articulated at the outset of Laudato Si and the encyclicals of his predecessors, dating back to John the 23rd's 1963 document Pacet in Terris, which was geared not only to Catholics and other Christians, but also all people of goodwill. Pope Francis is also not naive to how modern technology is being used to hurt people, especially in the social media. He said that dialogue is often confused with something quite different. The feverish exchange of opinions on social networks, frequently based on media information that is not always reliable, fake news, these exchanges are merely parallel monologues. Because for Pope Francis,
Authentic social dialogue involves the ability to respect the other point of view and to admit that it may include legitimate conviction and concerns. Pope Francis also knows that in many parts of the world there is a need for paths of peace to heal open wounds. There is also a need for peacemakers, men and women prepared to work boldly and creatively to initiate processes of healing and renewed encounter. But we wonder, where will our children learn the importance of dialogue? Pope Francis leads us to a basic answer: in the family. In fact, he states that if we can offer a more familiar response to our global conflict, then our situation would be better. He exemplified this in his writings of Amoris Laetitia, which is mainly a document on family life from the perspective of a pastor who was an authentic concern for his flock. In Fratelli Tutti, he said, family disputes are always resolved afterwards. The joys and sorrows of each of its members are felt by all. That is what it means to be a family. If only we could view our political opponents or neighbors in the same way that we view our children or spouse, mother or father, how good would this be? Imagine ninyo yun. Pamilya pa rin ang pinaka-importante at ang pinaka-kinakailangan natin. So if we would like to bring peace in this world, let us begin with our families. Many of our young people who turn out to be bullies in schools were not given the opportunity to learn warmth and care in their very own homes. The importance of the family is made more significant in the light of the new educational platforms where our parents would have to function again as teachers to their children. But would it also be possible for our children to teach their parents true Catholic values? I guess this is possible. Because this is what happened to one of the new blessed declared by our Holy Father Francis. His name is Carlos Acutis. He was an English-born Italian Catholic schoolboy and an amateur computer programmer. He was best known for documenting Eucharistic miracles around the world and cataloging them all into a website that he created in the months before his death from leukemia. He was noted for his cheerfulness, computer skills, and deep devotion to the Eucharist, which becomes a core theme of his life. You can just imagine my delight when I look into the image of this new blessed of the church wearing his jerseys and possibly with headsets around his neck. But what is most striking was the sharing of Carlos's mother Antonia, who admitted that she would not be that so-called Catholic devotee. She rarely attends Mass and receives Holy Communion just during special occasions. But now, with her son soon to be declared a saint, she was challenged to revive her Catholic faith. Imagine that, my dear Catholic school friends. We can certainly inspire a change in our community by raising devout Catholic children who were drawn to the beauty of our Catholic heritage and then later on teach their parents to do the same. I would be a living testimony to that. You know, my parents cannot be considered really very good Catholics. They're not members of religious organizations in our parish. They rarely go to Mass. Most of the time, only during Christmas and other special events. They were not even married in the church. But how come I became a priest today? I also wonder about that thing. But I believe that my Catholic faith is very much a product of my Catholic teachers, very good Catholic teachers at that. And I guess if we can do the same thing, we can send in a ripple effect to many of our barangays and our communities by promoting Catholic education through our young people educating their parents this time of pandemic. This leads us to the second dream of Pope Francis, and that is a dream built on mercy and compassion. At the very onset of his papacy, Pope Francis highlighted the importance of mercy in our modern world. He saw this very strongly in his own life, which is the reason why he chose Miserando atque vigendo as his episcopal motto that is taken from a homily on the call of Matthew by Saint Bede. Jesus saw the tax collector, and because he saw him through the eyes of mercy and chose him, he said to him, "Follow me." To look with an eye of mercy. That is what true global fraternity is for Pope Francis, which is the reason why he highlighted the Gospel of the Good Samaritan in this encyclical. Here, his being a Jesuit comes to the forefront. He wants us to approach this encyclical not just as a document to be studied, but a reflection guide to help us pray. So, let us embark on a prayerful reflection of Pope Francis's encyclical by reading this passage from the scripture. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" He answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend." Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? He said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." We can say that this gospel is very close to Pope Francis's heart, as he uses this very often in his talks. But the beauty of this story still remains to be fresh, especially to those who reads it. Just like a true Jesuit, he would like us to approach this gospel passage as a spiritual exercise. This we do through a Lectio Divina, that is saying, who are we in that story? It is interesting that the parable began with that question from a lawyer who wanted to test Jesus. Here, it is already quite evident that knowing the law does not always equate to being merciful. We know of many leaders who are products, even of our Catholic schools, who graduated with honors and gifted with accolades, but still rank so low in empathy. After all, empathy is not something you can teach and just learn from the books. It can only be learned through a significant meeting with the other. For Pope Francis, mercy is a key word that indicates God's action towards us. He does not limit himself merely to affirming his love, but makes it visible and tangible. Love, after all, can never be just an abstraction. By its very nature, it indicates something concrete, intentions, attitudes, and behaviors that are shown in daily living. Francis believes that this is very important in bringing an authentic spirit of fraternity in our society. Too often, the Pope says, we are constantly tempted to ignore others, especially the weak. He notes that for all the progress we have made, we are still illiterate when it comes to accompanying, caring for, and supporting the most frail and vulnerable members of our developed societies. We have become accustomed to looking the other way, passing by, ignoring situations until they affect us directly. Here, the Pope highlights that the biggest enemy that we should fight is that of indifference. There is a quote from Martin Niemöller, who was a German theologian and a Lutheran pastor. He used to be a supporter of the Nazi regime up until the Nazis gained stronger control of the churches. He was imprisoned in the concentration camps and narrowly escaped execution. After his imprisonment, he expressed his deep regret about not having done enough to help the victims of the Nazis. And here is his famous poem. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. In the past, we were taught various models of the society. Some would like to figure our society to be naturally a pyramid, where there are a few people at the top while the rest suffers at the bottom. That is why movements clamor for a reversal of the Tatsulok, which, according to the song from Bamboo, says, habang may tatsulok at sila ang nasa tuktok, di matatapos itong gulo. But still others would want an equal opportunity for everyone. And so it must be a circle. Others may propose other shapes. But for Pope Francis, the model must be that of a polyhedron. Well, some of you may be wondering, what will be this polyhedron? A polyhedron is practically a solid figure with many plane faces, typically more than 6. Let me show you an artistic rendition of this polyhedron. As you see, it is a three-dimensional form with many sides that are different shapes. Unlike a cube, whose sides are all equal squares, a polyhedron draws the eye with its complexity. Its beauty and its very nature as a polyhedron come from the fact that it is defined by difference. This is the reason why Pope Francis emphasized in this encyclical that this should be our guide. He quoted in his encyclical his apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, wherein he said that our model must be that of a polyhedron, in which the value of each individual is respected, where the whole is greater than the part. but it is also greater than the sum of its parts. I guess that is really very beautiful.
Ha?
That this side may not really be equal to this other side, but in this shape,
Pag hindi, sa kapag
you will and you cannot determine
Hindi,
which
pinaprint ko
is
sa Juan ko
really at the top and which is really at the bottom. That is how complex our society is. In polyhedron, where everybody is important. He also said, each of us can learn something from the others. No one is useless and no one is expandable. This is, in fact, the very reason why we strive to go to the peripheries and follow the example of the Good Samaritan. Pope Francis highlights that this parable shows us how a community can be rebuilt by men and women who identify with the vulnerability of others, who reject the creation of a society of exclusion and act instead as neighbors, lifting up and rehabilitating the fallen for the sake of the common good. For this part, let me show you a Thai commercial which shows us the power of goodness.
เขาจะได้อะไรถ้าเขาทำแบบนี้ทุกวันเขาจะไม่ได้อะไรเลยไม่ได้รวยขึ้นไม่ได้ออกทีวีไม่มีใครรู้จักไม่ได้มีชื่อเสียงที่มากขึ้นเพราะสิ่งที่เขาได้คือได้แค่ความรู้สึก
Nakita mo yung retreat ng girls? Oo. Saan tayo doon?
Di,
Saan tayo
Francis.
eh? Kaya na eh. Makasakit tayo. Pero saan ako dito?
ได้เข้าใจ
Wala yung sabi. Baka ganito din.
ได้ความรัก
Babies. Ako tayo.
ได้ในสิ่งที่เงินซื้อไม่ได้ได้โลกที่สวยงามกว่าเดิม
Sabi ang
ในชีวิตคุณ อะไรคือสิ่งที่คุณต้องการมากที่สุด
reminder naman. Ano na yun siya, no?
In this short video, it is evident that for a culture of mercy and compassion to thrive, there must be an authentic culture of encounter, which according to Pope Francis means that we as a people should be passionate about meeting others, seeking points of contact, building bridges, planning a project that includes
Parang
everyone.
yung
We wonder on how we can do this in our own schools. You know, I admired many of our schools who have integrated into their curriculum and exposure to various institutions and groups. Well, I know some of you might be thinking that this is something similar to a tour of a beauty queen who went to the slums of Tondo and realized that the life there is poor and very sad. But I guess she's
Ano na
also
nangyari
correct
sa
that there's a
eleksyon?
silver lining into it. Especially if we get our students
Lamang
learn
si
how to
Biden
be
dito,
grateful
kailan pa
and
to?
perhaps encourage them to do more by dreaming.
4 hours ago,
This
lamang
leads
si
us to
Biden.
the third vision that Pope Francis would like us to experience, which is a dream for a better world. It cannot be denied that this COVID-19 pandemic has greatly affected many of us as we all strive to bring our lives back to normal. I know it has already become a cliche, but I believe that we should strive not just for a new normal, but for a better normal. Pope Francis in Fratelli Tutti would like to use our experience of the pandemic in working for a better future. He said that the recent pandemic enabled us to recognize and appreciate once more all those around us who, in the midst of fear, responded by putting their lives on the line. We began to realize that our lives are interwoven with and sustained by ordinary people valiantly shaping the decisive events of our shared history. Doctors, nurses, pharmacists, storekeepers, and supermarket workers, cleaning personnel, caretakers, transport workers, men and women working to provide essential services and public safety, volunteers, priests, and religious. They understood that no one is saved alone. For this part, I would like to present to you a video which set in a world about 20 years from now. The father looks back into the experience of 2020 and narrates it as a bedtime story. And here is what he has to say.
Tell me the one about the rocks again. Where I'm going to vent.
But my boy, you're growing weary, sleepy thoughts about your head.
Please, that one's my favorite. I promise just once more.
Okay, snuggle down, my boy, though I know you know full well. The story starts before then, in a world I once would dwell. It was a world of waste and wonder, of poverty and plenty, back before we understood why hindsight's 2020. You see, the people came up with companies to trade across all lands, but they swelled and got much bigger than we ever could have planned. We'd always had our wants, but now it got so quick. You could have anything you dreamed of in a day, and with a click. We noticed families had stopped talking. That's not to say they never spoke, but the meaning must have melted, and the work-life balance broke. And the children's eyes grew square, and every toddler had a foe. They filtered out the imperfections, but amidst the noise, they felt alone. And every day the skies grew thicker, till you couldn't see the stars. So we flew in planes to find them, while down below, we filled our cars. We'd drive around all day in circles. We'd forgotten how to run. We swapped the grass for tarmac, shrunk the parks till there were none. We filled the sea with plastic, because our waste was never capped, until each day when you went fishing, you'd pull them out, already wrapped. And while we drank and smoked and gambled, our leaders taught us why. It's best to not upset the lobbies. More convenient to die. But then in 2020, a new virus came our way. The governments reacted and told us all to hide away. While we all were hidden, amidst the fear, and all the while, people dusted off their instincts. They remembered how to smile. They started clapping to say thank you, and calling up their mums. And while the car keys gathered dust, they would look forward to their runs. And with the skies less full of voyagers, the earth began to breathe, and the beaches bore new wildlife that scuttled off into the seas. Some people started dancing, some were singing, some were baking. We'd grown so used to bad news, but saw good news was in the making. And so when we found the cure, and were allowed to go outside, we all preferred the world we found to the one we left behind. Old habits became extinct, and they made way for the new, and every simple act of kindness was now given its due.
But why did it take a virus to bring the people back together?
Sometimes you've got to get sick, my boy, before you start feeling better. Now lie down and dream of tomorrow, and all the things that we can do. And who knows, if you dream hard enough, maybe some of them will come true. We now call it the Great Realization, and yes, since then there have been many. But that's the story of how it started, and why hindsight's 2020.
But why did it take us so long to bring the people back together? Well, sometimes you've got to get sick, my boy, before you start feeling better. This is the question that was asked by the kid to his father at the end of that video. And yes, it is true that sometimes we need to get sick in order to start feeling better. Pope Francis states this beautifully in Fratelli Tutti as he quotes himself in his Urbi and Orbi message at the height of the pandemic. Amid the storm, the facade of those stereotypes with which we camouflage our egos, always worrying about appearances, has fallen away, revealing once more the ineluctable and blessed awareness that we are part of one another, that we are brothers and sisters of one another. Reading these words still reminds me of that very strong image of Pope Francis walking alone in the plaza of St. Peter, mildly soaked by rain. The Holy Father reinforced in his encyclical the need to go beyond working on a new normal, but a stronger and a better normal. Pope Francis says, anyone who thinks that the only lesson to be learned was the need to improve what we were already doing or to refine existing systems and regulations is denying reality. We can say that Fratelli Tutti is a continuation of what the Holy Father has begun in Laudato Si. Just like in Laudato Si, Pope Francis speaks of a throwaway world brought about by a throwaway culture. He laments that what is thrown away are not only food and dispensable objects, but often human beings themselves. He felt so sad after hearing how many senior citizens would have to die in many healthcare facilities. Many of them were left behind by their children because they have no one to care for them. And there are no resources that is being provided by their governments. We need to develop the awareness that nowadays we are either all saved together or no one is saved. Poverty, decadence, and suffering in one part of the earth are a silent breeding ground for problems that will end up affecting the entire planet. That is what Pope Francis said in Fratelli Tutti. While technology is very important in our world, we also know that technology sometimes makes us feel more alone. Here, Pope Francis highlighted the need to bring forward a more authentic experience of friendship. But this love can only be reached if we go beyond the walls which we build around ourselves in order to make us feel more secure. He said, a love capable of transcending borders is the basis of what in every city and country can be called social friendship. Genuine social friendship within a society makes true universal openness possible. Similarly, Francis stresses the need for another kind of being in the world, one that is more human, one that returns to this foundational vocation wherein God calls all people to be peacemakers and reconcilers. Returning to the Franciscan principle of fraternitas, the Pope invokes the family as a metaphor for reimagining social structures and political engagements. Authentic peacemaking requires truth telling and a shared commitment to the good of the other. It also requires recognizing how decisions have consequences, sometimes dramatically negative ones, for the more vulnerable members of society. He adds, those who work for tranquil social coexistence should never forget that inequality and lack of integral human development make peace impossible. Again, this harkens back to the model and vision of St. Francis, who, in promoting fraternitas as the lens through which to view all relationships, always prioritized the poor and the marginalized. But how do we promote this new vision for the society? Pope Francis emphasized the importance of gratuitousness. Gratuitousness. He defines gratuitousness as the ability to do some things simply because they are good in themselves, without concern for personal gain or recompense. Gratuitousness makes it possible for us to welcome the stranger, even though this brings us no immediate tangible benefit. Here I am reminded of one author who used to say that at the very end, the only two things that we need in this life is gratitude and forgiveness. And if you have those two, you will live a very meaningful life. We began our sharing by highlighting the need to keep on dreaming, especially during this time of pandemic. If there is anything that St. Francis and Pope Francis has in common, is that they are both dreamers. As a Franciscan, I'm very much humbled by the fact that it takes a Jesuit to make all of us friars to maintain our main charism, which is fraternal life. My fellow consecrated men and women would know that we all have vows, which we profess, but all of them are interlinked to our capacity to live as a community. Alone, dreaming will be difficult, but together, we will be invincible. Let me end my sharing on Francis's dream with a Filipino translation of the song Impossible Dream by Gregorio Between. I guess this is more meaningful now as we read it. The new title is Ang Pangarap, ang Pangarapin ang Di Mangyayaring Pangarap. Ang pangarapin ang di mangyayaring pangarap. Ang kalabanin ang wala pang talong kalaban. Ang kayanin ang matinding kalungkutan. Ang pumunta sa di pinupuntahan ng magigiting. Ang itama ang di maitamang pagkakamali. Ang umibig ng tunay at wagas mula sa malayo. Ang sumubok kahit pagod na ang mga bisig. Ang marating, ang di marating na bituin. Ito ang layunin ko. Ang sundan yaong bituin kahit wala ng pag-asa. Kahit gaano kalayo para ipaglaban ng tama nang walang anumang pag-aatubili. Kahit na magmarcha patungong impyerno para sa makalangit na mithiin. At ang alam kong kung magiging tapat ako sa dakilang layuning ito, ng aking puso ihihimlay ng payapa kung ako'y dinala na sa huling hantungan. At ang daigdig ay magiging maayos dahil dito. Ng isang taong inapit, maraming pilat, ay nagsumikap sa huling tapang niya. Umaabot lamang ang meeting between. Let us dream then as a single human family, as fellow travelers sharing the same flesh, as children of the same earth, which is our common home. Each of us bringing the richness of his or her beliefs and convictions.
Convictions.
Each of
Each of
us
us
with
with
his
his
or
or
her
her
own
own.
voice. Brothers and sisters all.
And we are back. Welcome to the question and answer portion of this webinar. No, ang ganda-ganda naman ng sharing ni Father, particularly yung tula sa dulo, no, yung translation ng Impossible Dream. I am sure maraming gustong kumuha ng kopya nung translation na yon, Father. But before we proceed, may we just remind you again that you will receive the certificate of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. The link is posted in the comment section of this page in Facebook and on YouTube in the caption section. Please note that the link will be available only after this webinar until 7 p.m. today. Again, until 7 p.m. today. So we encourage you to answer that form and you will receive your certificate of attendance within the next 3 to 5 days. No? Please note also that the videos of all the webinars are saved on our video archive on Facebook and on our YouTube CAP channel. So you can watch them anytime at your convenience or share them with your friends who you think will benefit from the webinars that we are offering. You can also watch the past webinars that you find relevant for your use. No? So let us begin with our question and answer. But before that, Father, let me read to you some comments. No? Let us greet those who are joining us. We give a shout out to the core group of the National Christian Formation Commission, led by Father Nolan Ke. And we also heard that Cardinal Quevedo is watching. So hello, Cardinal.
Hello po.
Hello. Friends from PCNE, Exicom, Father Rico Ayo, Father Nono Alfonso, Father Diggs, Joy, Irma, Stella, hello. And we have viewers from all the way from the United States of America. Meron din sa Holo, sa Capiz, Bayumbong, Tuguegarao, Camiguin, Mati, Davao Oriental, Davao City, Naga City. I hope you're okay there in
Mhm.
Bicol. Lanao del Norte, Cagayan de Oro, Mactan, Metro Manila, Caloocan, Quezon City, and Haro, Iloilo City. Sige, you can still continue to type where you are watching from. And then from Sister Hilda Villador, thank you, Father Dex. You have extensively explained the content of the encyclicals for better and unified understanding, especially for us within the Catholic learning institutions. Very challenging talk, especially now that there is no face-to-face encounter. So we have to reach out to establish better friendship encounter with parents and learners. Ayan. Tapos from John Paul Domasian. Thank you, Father Dexter. You mentioned the pharmacists, no, yung mga frontliners natin. And they also like your videos, no? Like si Sister Bangkoy said, nice video, the conversation of Saint Francis and Sultan. And some of them are also asking for the links to your video, Father.
Okay.
So maybe you can send them to us, and then we will put them alongside the materials that we normally upload on our CAAP website, no? Okay, sige, Father. So, are you ready for the questions?
Yes, I
Ito,
am ready.
okay. So, tas dapat parang pang Miss Universe to, Father. Thank you for that beautiful question. Okay. So, Father Dexter, good morning. Question po. This is from Adi Isidro, one of the campus minister of Miriam College, also part of our core group in NCFC. What can you say about the tension between the church's identity and relevance that Fratelli Tutti has turned our attention to again? As critics would imply, there seems to be a dissolution of the Christian or Catholic identity in Fratelli Tutti's message in the name of relevance and fraternity. So that's the first question. Second one also, how would Fratelli Tutti change the way we accommodate non-Catholic individuals and groups in our Catholic schools?
Okay, thank you for that wonderful question. Yeah, but before that, I would like to express my oneness na with all our sisters and brothers, particularly in Bicol. In the face of this calamity, we should say that this really should highlight our need for authentic fratelli tutti, our being fraternity, our oneness. And we are one with you po. Kasama po namin kayo sa aming mga panalangin at dasal. And most importantly, I should first greet you a happy birthday, Mary Ann.
Thank you, Father. Thank
Yes,
you.
imagine, really working for the Catholic schools. Walang
Siyempre naman.
break para
Thank you.
sa paglilingkod sa simbahan at sa bayan. Ayan. So
Thank you,
really,
Father.
thank you for your service to us. And so, let me address that question. And really, thank you for raising that question, particularly about the identity. There is that misconception, especially those who are not really into understanding what interreligious dialogue is all about, no? Especially that idea that the tendency is, okay, everything is okay, everything is fine, so everything is valid. No, not necessarily, no? One important element in any dialogue is an understanding of identity. Yun ang pinakauna. If you don't know who you are, what do you believe, then there will be no space for dialogue. Anong pag-uusapan natin kung hindi mo mismo alam kung saan ka nanggagaling? And so, contrary to what the critics would say, the opposite should actually happen. If we enter into dialogue, then we must first know what are we really teaching? What are we really saying here? Yun ang pinakauna, no? So if you enter into interreligious dialogue, ibig sabihin ba nun, kunin mo na lang yung lahat? No. While we grow interested with meditations, for example, everything is available now, even in Spotify, things like that. I personally do practice some meditations from Zen Buddhism. I did my thesis when I was in college in the principle of nothingness, again from the Oriental philosophers. But at the same time, I studied it with the light of my own faith. No? Lahat tayo pag pumasok sa isang dialogo, dala-dala mo yung perspektibo mo, pananaw mo, at sarili mo. Hindi mo yung maialis, hindi mo yung maibubura. At dapat naroon yun. Pinaka-importante yun. So, I guess that should be the first thing, the fourth thing. Authentic dialogue should know and really highlight what our catechism would teach us. No? That's why it's lamentable, no? Nakakalungkot na parang this time, unti-unting nabubura, naalis, so parang nai-integrate na lang yung religion classes into many subjects. Because after all, maybe the idea is pare-pareho lang naman ng tinuturo. So, why make it separate? No? But the thing is, yes, we may be talking about the same principles or things or matters, and then, totoo yun, no? We have unity. May mga pagkakaisa tayo. But we approach things differently, and that should be highlighted, most importantly. So, Fratelli Tutti highlights the importance of that dialogue, the importance of knowing my belief that this is our practices, because how can you talk, for example, to a Muslim without highlighting, okay, kaya pala kayo, meron pala kayong ganito. We have our Lenten season also, for example. You have that fasting also. Yes, we also do our fast. And this is why we do our fast. Because otherwise, if you cannot explain it, that will be meaningless. The second one is actually related to the first one. No? So how do we accommodate non-Catholic individuals and groups? No? And earlier I mentioned how I really appreciated how many of our schools, I know, some of them are here actually, who are graciously catering and bringing education to students, especially in Mindanao. I would like to extend my greetings to our school heads in Mindanao.
Yeah.
Really courageously ministering even to those dangerous areas, I should say. Maraming mga
Yes
dangerous
po.
areas, and yet
Masilan.
talagang nandun pa rin, nakatayo pa rin yung ating mga Catholic schools. And I actually got my response from them. No? How do they integrate? With respect, with kindness. No? That is how we invite people into our faith. No? Sinabi yun ni Pope Francis in Fratelli Tutti, usually our idea of dialogue is always focused on argumentation. Na parang, okay, makikipagtalo ako, this is what I believe. But you see, that's why I decided to show that video of St. Francis talking to the Sultan,
Yeah.
and
That's a
how
very
he
nice
approached it
video.
so kindly, gently. The Sultan was actually drawn not maybe to the content of his teachings, paggamat sabi ko nga, maaring naintindihan niya yun dahil he also have some exposure to Christianity or Christian friends. But what may have intrigued him is that courage of that man. What is this? What is it in this person? No? Bakit siya matyaga? Bakit siya masipag? And I guess that will be the main catechesis, or the main way that we bring people to really get interested into our faith without really forcing, no? Parang halos talaga ipilit natin yung ating mga katuruan sa kanila. Then they will begin to realize, oh wow, why is sister so happy, no? Bakit kaya siya masayang masaya? Why is she so prayerful? What is that rosary? Then you start to explain in a spirit of friendship, in a spirit of fraternal discourse. Sabi nga nung iba, they would like to improve on the word dialogue. They would say that maybe conversation. Minsan daw kasi yung iba parang yung dialogue parang ngayon. Ewan ko lang, no? Di ba yun siguro sa gamit, no? I should say. No? Minsan kasi pag ida-dialogue ka daw ni sister, may dialogue daw.
Negative connotation.
Parang meron siyang connotation na, nako, parang hirisong.
Masinsinang usapan to na ano.
Ibang to. May, papatawag yung magulang, may dialogue daw po kayo. Nako, mukhang... But if it is a conversation, and if kung tama yung understanding, a more friendlier way of approach, then it becomes more fruitful. And I guess that is the key concepts that Pope Francis is bringing into this document.
Yeah, okay. Sige. Father, this one from Mr. Arellano, our executive director. The world we live in presently is almost the same as during the turbulent period of St. Francis. Now people talk about the VUCA world. Yan ito isang natin ngayon, the VUCA world, volatile, unpredictable, complex, and ambiguous. I think that's what VUCA means. No? As if our time is especially different from the past. How can we make the schools become more effective agents of dialogue? Ito na naman, the operative word is dialogue. And fraternity, when most of us are doing things virtually now. Kasi medyo ito yung new normal natin ngayon, no? Virtual, no? So how can we be more effective agents of dialogue and fraternity as schools?
I guess you have been discussing these things in your seminars for so long and for so many times also. And let me just contribute that really this is really bringing us into a new way of facing reality. Personally, ako lang, no, I usually give talks, but this time it is a unique experience for me also to be facing this camera. I have many friends here in our convents, professors at that,
or also adjusting into this new technology. But at the same time also, we realize na talagang this will be part of it eh. Talagang bahagi at bahagi na ito. And let me take the cue from the video which I shared with you, earlier. The title of that video, for those who are looking for it, is The Great Realization. And there you see that ganun pa rin, they're still in that modern context. They're still using the cell phone. They're still using the Skype. They didn't throw all of these technologies, but it becomes more meaningful. It's how you facilitate and how you animate conversations in order to really go straight into the heart of the content of what you are saying. And media is what it is. It is just a media. It's just a medium, a way of connecting. It will connect us depending kung paano natin gagamitin. No? If we are good in connections, then we will be very good at that. As long as we're really authentic, no? Yun yung pinaka-importante, no? Let me just say na tulad ng sinabi nga, these times that we are now living is not so different really in the past, no? You know, when I was reading about these things about plagues, no? It made me realize how the times before in the past are similarly more difficult to what we are experiencing now. And yet at the same time also, these plagues, these moments of catastrophes also ushers in a lot of saints. Really, no? Mas maraming lumalabas na santo, even congregations at that, who are actually inspired by that experience. And I would like to believe, that's the prayer also of many of our teachers, that this experience will bring more of our young people into considering religious life or priestly life.
Yeah.
And even that, yes, totoo. I know because, Marianne, maraming lumapit ngayon sa akin, nakikipag-usap. Some of them step out and then finally, nung natahimik, biglang napaisip sila what's really valuable, what's really meaningful, what's really important. Kaya sabi ko, maybe where we should really come in, especially during this time, no? Paano nga ba tayo makakatulong? Is to make available these platforms for authentic conversation. Authentic conversation.
Authentic conversation. Paano yung gagawin, Father? Kasi merong nag-question dito, di ba? How can we, thank you for your wonderful sharing from Rico Hakoba. How can we be neighbors in the digital context? So parang, how does that work? How does this sharing work in the digital context? Kasi dyan tayo lang connected ngayon eh. Nag-freeze ba si Father? Baka, I think Father Dexter will have to dial in again, no? But, so can we ask, we will contact him to dial again?
Okay, thank you. Thank you sa panonood. Ang ganda ng topic. Father Tutti, Fratelli Tutti.